the hardest thing to do, and might even be impossible, is to you can't outbuild a bad property, right?
Yeah.
If you buy the wrong property to start with, it doesn't matter how much design you put in and how great the furniture is and da 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 da. You've bought the wrong home, and so starting with the right piece of property is crucial. We do some high level um, advice and suggestions and things like that, and we work with investors all the time that are buying their first or their 10th property. I probably got 3 or 4 homes in my inbox right now to look at this morning as we're recording this, and I'll give some thoughts and advice. We also have partnered with some great companies like STR Search, where they actually go out and help you find the perfect property, underwrite it, make sure that it has meets all the regulations and requirements. So it's either going to be you outsource it and hire somebody that does this for a professional, for a profession, or you spend a lot of time, a lot of your energy in underwriting deals, looking at regulations, looking at properties. Well, either way, we're happy to help you. But yeah, there's definitely a lot of work that goes in on the front end to making sure you find the right home. Because like we said, you can't outbuild a bad property.
Yeah.
Um, and then if you think about it, the furniture, decor, amenities as an afterthought, and you have a really small budget set aside for it, you're going to be disappointed in your results because your final product is going to be disappointing, right? If you buy a $600,000 house and all you have set aside is 10 grand for furniture, towels, linens, cups, plates, trash cans, like what are you going to get? A hot tub costs 10 grand. So you're going to get IKEA furniture, Walmart, the cheapest of the cheap. And then your guests are going to know that. They're going to feel it. They're going to realize that your home was poorly put together, not going to get great reviews. And then the home is going to underperform from a revenue standpoint. And that's what we see more often than not is when people say, hey, short-term rentals don't work and I can't make any money and this property's not cash flowing. And we look at their home and we say, well, of course it's not. Would you want to stay in this
Yeah.
house? Would you pay $1,000 a night to sit on that couch in that living room? No, of course not. So you've really got to be strategic, and your furniture, decor, your renovations, it can't be an afterthought. It's got to be on the forefront of your underwriting.
Yeah. Yeah. And speaking of pricing, how do you recommend people budget for furnishings and design and the setup of the property as they're starting to look at potential deals?
Yeah, that can be really tough because it's based on a lot of factors, right? The condition of the home, is it brand new construction or does it need renovations? The square footage, the bedroom count, the location. There's so many things to consider. And that's why my inbox is full of properties right now to look at for people. So always happy to take a look at an address, shoot it my way. If we'll share the email in the show notes, I can give some thoughts and insight. Do the same thing with inspection reports. We review those with people from a licensed general contractor standpoint. Um, there's a couple of online calculators that can be helpful. Obviously, like listening to this podcast will give you some insight and thoughts into how to budget for that. But just like anything, I think it's going to take you twice as long. It's going to cost you twice as much as you think on the front end, right?
Yeah. Do you have like a ballpark rule of thumb, cost per room or anything like that that you advise people as a place to start?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's if you've got a 3 bedroom, 2 bath house, I think you need to budget somewhere in the 50 to 60 grand range at least. If you've got a larger home, you probably need to be 70 to 80. And I've seen houses where people are spending as much as $100,000 in furnishing. And so it's a substantial investment depending on the size of the home and what goes into it. So I think that catches some people off guard, especially when they're new. But what I've also seen is that people that are on their second and third one, they understand. Like they're
Yeah.
like, yeah, I thought the first one was going to cost me 20 grand. It ended up costing me 60. And so,
Yeah. 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 And do you think that this process, like working with you guys, do you think it's as important to have a designer involved if you're doing more of like utilitarian, more affordable properties, or is it just for like the high end, you know, um, typical vacation rental type areas?
yeah, I mean, it certainly wouldn't hurt. I don't think that people are very visual when they're booking short-term rentals and they don't read descriptions. I'm a firm believer in that. They book on location and the photos that they see. And I think that photos, when you look in the Airbnb and VRBO app, it's very similar to like Instagram or social media where photos are the highlight and what capture people's attention. And so if you don't use a professional designer and your home is poorly furnished and doesn't photograph well, of course you're going to suffer. And even in the lower end price point, right? Even if you book a Motel 8, they have great photos. We all know
Yeah.
what it's going to be like when we get there. But
Yeah.
those rooms look good in photos because that's hospitality. They understand that we're booking based upon visuals and emotions. And so, yeah, I think it's super important. I don't know if there's anything more important than making sure that your property is visually appealing to people when they're looking at their options when they're going to book.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yep. Um, and on your website, you guys mentioned that you specialize in data driven design. Can you just kind of explain what data driven design is and how it's different?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very much looking at the comps of the market, the location, and the guest avatar, and figuring out what's going to drive revenue. And so, an example would be like if you put those pathway lights, the outside nighttime pathway lights that
Hmm.
can be quite expensive if you have a professional company install them. And they might be a really nice thing to have if you were living in the home and you had a higher end house, but they don't necessarily drive additional revenue. And so spending thousands of dollars on pathway lights outside is probably not going to have any ROI when you operate a short term rental. Same thing with uh, a tile subway shower. If you have a shower that's out of date in a home and you go in and gut it and do a brand new tile shower with glass doors, it looks really nice. Probably cost you $10,000 to $15,000 in today's money, but it doesn't drive any additional revenue.
Mm.
That money would have been better spent putting a hot tub in the backyard in some markets because that hot tub, that amenity, probably will drive $10,000 to $15,000 a year in additional revenue and will pay for itself. And so that's what we mean when we say data driven design and renovations is making sure you're allocating resources to the proper place in your home and not wasting money on things that you might like to see or you might like to update in the home that will most likely not translate into additional revenue as a short-term rental.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and it's not intuitive in a lot of cases. It seems like,
It's
um,
counterintuitive. It actually goes against a lot of the things that we've been taught and we've learned as real estate investors
yeah,
where the kitchen and the bathroom are always priorities, right? Why
yeah,
wouldn't you replace those countertops and da 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 da? And I would say, well, great, because we have a home down the street that still has Formica countertops in it, and it did $250,000 last year in revenue
yeah.
because they put the money where they should have, and they're seeing the fruits of their labor on that. And so, yeah, it's totally counterintuitive to what we've learned.
That's interesting. Yeah, and earlier you mentioned, some people set up properties that they wouldn't even want to stay in themselves. The couch isn't comfortable, and different features like that. How do you balance? I've noticed that it's in some ways difficult as you're setting up a property to balance function with design. Like the property that I'll see some listing photos where it's like it is a gorgeous property. Anyone would want to stay there. But every item there looks like something that's going to break the first time a guest shows up. They got a white couch. They got like a bunch of, decor that's like very fragile and stuff like that. So, how do you balance the items that are going to hold up over time because it gets used hard with really beautiful design elements as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. Great point because I know firsthand experience. We've got a 5-year-old and a 3-year-old. Whenever we get to a new property, you know what we do? The first thing, we don't even bring our luggage inside. We walk through the house and we start picking up knickknacks, the little glass balls, the da 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 that are at kid
Yeah.
level, and we know we're going to break, and we put them on a top shelf. And we have to basically declutter and de-decorate some houses that we've stayed at because they weren't thinking about us as the end user and our little kids. We don't that stuff might look cool in a photo, but it's definitely not functionable. It's gonna break. My kid's gonna pick up these little glass ball decorations and throw them against the wall or throw them at the dog, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're leaning on expert experience from people like us or professional designers who've done properties that can use hospitality grade furniture, can still make something look great, but also be functional at the same time. And there's definitely an art to that and a trick to that. And I think that people who do it well have done it over and over again and have made mistakes and learned, oh, we shouldn't use that. We should use this. Like I've got a house that we used some outside furniture for the couches in the game room because it's a guy's game room with poker tables, pool tables, dart boards, a bar. We know they're going to be drinking. We know they're going to be eating. We know there's going to be spills. The couch looks really, really good. And until you sit on it and you like looked at it, you wouldn't even realize that it's a piece of outdoor furniture.
Mm.
But it's got that very nice microfiber, weatherproof cushions, and it's going to stand up to the test of time in that room. And so that's just like an example of a professional company knowing, hey, if we threw a cloth white couch in this guy's game room, it is going to get destroyed. And so we've got to be strategic about what we put into that room.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. And something you mentioned earlier that I fully agree with is you really have to know the guest avatar for that market and understand the comps in that market to determine, what's required from a design standpoint. That being said, generally, in your experience, what are the highest income producing amenities that you recommend? Like when you do a typical deal, and I know they're all different markets, but do you see there's like a few things that stand out that you would highly recommend people have because the revenue really gets a boost when you see these?
Yeah, absolutely. The first one is going to be heads and beds. And so if you can increase occupancy in a property, then you're immediately going to see a huge boost in returns. And so what I like to look at and look for would be maybe lower bedroom count homes with higher square footage. So a 3-bedroom, 2-bath that is 2,800 square feet. Well, immediately I'm thinking, hey, that's probably got 2 dining rooms. One of them's a formal dining room. It's got an office that could become a bedroom. It's got a den space. There's probably additional rooms and square footage in the house that could be easily and inexpensively converted into a 4th or 5th bedroom. And now I'm increasing my occupancy by 2, 4, 6. And so increased occupancy, in my opinion, is always one of the highest ROI decisions you can make in a short-term rental. I call it an amenity. It's an amenity.
Yeah.
Number 2, depending on the market, hot tubs are very high ROI driving amenities. If you are in kid-friendly markets, having a kid-friendly property, pack and play, high chair, toys, books, a room set up for kids that families are going to look at and go, oh, that's the kids' room. That's where we're sending the kids to play. Those are going to be high ROI decisions to make. Families pay a premium because they're traveling with 6, 7, 10 people at a time. And so definitely increase your occupancy, definitely tailor to your guest if that's a hot tub or if that's a kid-friendly property. Those are going to be the biggest things that you can do. And then I would say the next thing to me is doing amenities well and not half-assing them. And so I would rather you, instead of saying, I'm going to do 5 amenities in this home, but I'm going to have a crappy little fire pit with just a couple of chairs, and I'm going to have one arcade game in a closet that I'm going to call a little game room, and just poorly doing things, I think you're better off just doing 1 or 2 amenities and doing them very well. And so, hey, we've got an epic fire pit with 10 chairs for everyone and string lights and a swinging bench and some cool decor elements to it. And we've turned this room into a really, really cool game room. So I would prioritize quality over quantity when it comes to amenities and making sure that what you do really well.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, you see that. And even if you set it up, decently initially, a lot of people let those things go, and then their guests show up, and it's like you said, like there's one chair that works when they show up, and the fire pit's really run down and stuff. So
Exactly.
that makes a ton of sense. I was pretty blown away because we have a hot tub in one of our properties, and I was blown away at the cost to maintain, the ongoing cost. It's actually more expensive than our pools. To the weekly maintenance, if something breaks, the maintenance on that, increased, expense for your utilities, the refunds that you have to give because there's going to be
Hot tub
times
wasn't
people
ready.
check
Yep.
in. Yep. And the hot tub's not working, and that's the only reason they booked. And so you got to give them, a discount on their stay. So all of that factors in, not just the cost up front to buy a hot tub, but you really have to think through all that. So how do you determine in a market, yes, a hot tub does make sense. It's going to, above and beyond all those costs, it's going to make you even more revenue, or it's not worth it.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right. There's definitely a delicate balance there. And you do have to look at it holistically, the whole picture, not just what's the additional revenue, but what's the additional cost? What's the additional expense? Are we going to net any additional money by having this here? Um, we're looking at readily available data. You've got Rabu, you've got AirDNA, you've got some of these resources that give you the comps. And we're looking at, hey, if the top 5 properties in this home all have hot tubs, and then the next 5 properties don't have hot tubs, and there's a difference between 10 or 15 or 20 grand in revenue, well, it's probably a good decision to have a hot tub in that market. If there's not, if there's only a $3,000 or $4,000 difference in revenue, then maybe the benefits don't outweigh the negatives and the costs and the headache of dealing with it.
Yeah.
So definitely looking at that. We also are using first party data. So we're using our ability to look at homes that we've done in these markets is a great benchmark for us. And because we've been doing this for 5 years, we have the benefit of saying, hey, man, in Blue Ridge, we've done 5 houses and these guys did this and this is the revenue they're doing. And these guys didn't do this and this is the revenue we're doing. And so we've learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes. And there's amenities, there's decisions that we made 2-3 years ago that didn't pan out. And we go, oh gosh, we're not going to do that again. That just didn't make any sense. And guests weren't willing to pay any more for it. And there's other ones where it was a slam dunk. And we said, hey man, we started putting pickleball courts in these houses and they're making 30 grand a year on top of everybody else. And the pickleball court only cost 25 grand. So boom, that was a great decision to make.
That's what I was going to ask you about next, actually. It's funny you bring that up because you'd mentioned pickleball courts before. I've seen that a lot recently. Like more and more people are putting in pickleball courts. It's become more and more popular. Do you think this is a trend, or do you think it's here to stay? And it sounds like it generally is a good idea. Like it pays for itself, or is it only in very select situations?
Yeah, I think it's definitely market specific. I couldn't fathom that pickleball is going anywhere. It's still the fastest growing sport in America. I just saw a news story the other day that there's a couple of female professional pickleball players that are getting paid more than WNBA players to play pickleball. And so I don't think it's a fad or a trend. I don't think it's disappearing in the next couple of years. I do think that it's something that's going to be around for a long time. And then at the end of the day, too, from a contractor's perspective, putting in a pickleball court in your backyard could be simply repurposed or dual purposed, and you could have a basketball hoop or a basketball court. Or you could use that concrete pad in the future and put a pergola on it and seating and fire pits and things like that. And so even if you have to repurpose that investment or shift it a little bit, it's still a valuable asset to have in your property if it makes sense and you have the space for it. And so it's definitely not one of those things where I think, hey, in 5 years, people aren't going to be playing pickleball and you're going to have to start ripping out these concrete pads. I don't think that's going to be the case.
Yeah.